Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips, which is brought to you by WellnessForumHealth and the Wellness Forum Institute for Health Studies. I have a couple of announcements. I have some feedback from a reader or subscriber, and then I will share with you some information about this new blood test that many of you have emailed me about, asked me to check into for colorectal cancer. So I'll finish with that. All right, so first thing, our annual Prevent Cancer campaign ends next week on the 15th. Here's the way it works. In case you're not familiar, you sign our pledge card, and then you get a gift card, which I'll talk about in a minute, and an invitation to participate in one of two live workshops on preventing cancer. And in those workshops, I'm offering it twice, and I'll record it, of course. I'm going to talk about things you've asked me to talk about, like how important is organic food and how concerned should I be about chemicals and things of that nature. So you choose the date, then you get a discount on your conference ticket. And also, we added a couple more options for how you can use your discount, your gift card, to get other programs that we offer here at Wellness Forum. So, conference is coming up. It's the first weekend in November, starts October 31st. And every week I've been talking about one of our speakers. So this week I'll highlight Kylie Aurora, one of the best psychologists in the United States, great member of our faculty. Many of you have taken classes with her and continue to take classes with her. She's going to be talking about anxiety and depression treatment. It's increasing, not decreasing, and almost everybody's had a bout of one or the other or both. So I think you'll find what she has to say very, very interesting. The other thing, I always forgot to mention this, but if you want my free report on informed decision making for cancer, send me an email. I'll send it to you. If you have a friend or a family member who's dealing with the very difficult decisions that have to be made about treatment or not having treatment, all that sort of thing, this should be helpful. And again, it's free. You just have to send me an email and I'll send it to you. So let's cover correspondence from a subscriber, and it pertains to yoga. As you guys know, I'm an avid fan. I repaired my own very beaten up body that was fat and out of shape at the time and also severely injured from a car accident with yoga. So that made me a big believer, which is why I bought the yoga studio that I own right now. But here's what my subscriber says. I just have to say once again, I can't say enough good things about the yoga class I took with you last fall. It's been over a year now, and I practiced yoga consistently over this past year. Even though I'm typically only done it once a week, I've experienced tremendous gains in strength and flexibility. Most importantly, I haven't had any days where I couldn't move due to my back and neck as I had in the past prior to faithful yoga practice. I never imagined that I would be a person who would benefit from yoga. Thank God I listened to you. I'd suffered from pinched nerves due to a herniated disc in my neck, and my back would periodically go out to what doctors told me were bulging discs in my lower back. I'd been to physical therapy multiple times and never received anything close to what your yoga has provided. At one point, a surgeon told me the best bet would be to fuse the vertebrae in my neck. So glad I didn't believe that and found you. My goal this year is to get yoga in twice a week. I know from my experience and factual information that yoga is just as important as cardio, yet I still have to tell myself that every week. Hopefully by next year at this time, it won't be such a fight in my head. And as an aside, isn't that always where the fight is, in our heads, right? Back to the correspondence, I just can't say enough good things about the way you shared yoga with us. It's a gift that will keep on giving for the rest of my life. Thank you. And with that in mind, I'm teaching one more virtual yoga class series this year. It starts next Sunday. 4 group classes, 1 private lesson, and access to a platform so that you can do this on your own, like this person has been doing after the class series is over. And again, I'll reemphasize, I wouldn't be walking around right now if it weren't for yoga. And some of you might remember a couple of weeks ago, I reported that I was suffering from yoga deficiency disease because I hadn't taken a yoga class for about 8 days. And my back was starting to hurt, which just reminded me how important, as this woman says, yoga is to do all the time, every week, never skip, for the rest of my life, for as long as I don't wish to have pain, and I don't wish to have pain. I mentioned the couple of additional things we added to your gift card, which you can apply discounts to. And that is the Common Causes and Conditions weekends that are coming up. Part 1 is October 18th and 19th. We're going to talk about hypertension, AFib, UTIs, headaches and migraines, reflux, restless leg, thyroid disorders, kidney stones, and more. And part 2, following weekend. And of course, we record all of this if you're thinking, but I'm not available that weekend. Tetanus vaccines, hemorrhoids, food allergies and sensitivities, tinnitus, fibromyalgia, new perspectives on depression and anxiety, and more. So lots of time for questions, and it's a weekend event, and we hope that you will want to join us. So information on any of this stuff, pampopper@msn.com. Now to get to the new blood test for colorectal cancer screening. So as promised, I looked into it. Here goes. In July of this year, the FDA approved a blood test called SHIELD, which is reported to find cancers when they're early stage and curable. Guardant is the manufacturer, and the approval and the target market is people aged 45 and older who are at average risk of developing colorectal cancer. The test supposedly works by detecting fragments of DNA shed from polyps that can turn cancerous. The basic rationale is that it's really difficult, increasingly difficult, to convince women and men, people, to agree to colonoscopy or fecal sample testing. So it's easier to get them to consent to a blood test. It's easy for a doctor to suggest it, or a nurse practitioner, while you're in the office. I don't know that that makes it a good idea, but that is the premise on which it was developed. So the first problem is the rationale for the test is false. According to so-called experts who are just raving about this new test online, regular screening can prevent as much as 73% of colorectal cancer deaths. This is simply not true. The first randomized controlled trial that examined colonoscopy as a means for preventing colorectal cancer death, and all-cause mortality wasn't published until October 2022, long after colonoscopy had become the gold standard, and it showed clearly that there was no benefit from colonoscopy when used for population screening. All that polyp snipping that often results from colonoscopy changes nothing. The only thing that will change the risk of colon cancer death is to stop growing polyps, and since we know the cause, that's easy enough to fix for most, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. So the only justification for which we're supposed to be all aflutter about this blood test is that it'll be easier to convince people to do it. It might, but the question for this, as with all cancer screening tests, is will this reduce the risk of cancer or death from cancer? And the answer is a resounding no. In a study published in March, Guardant reported that SHIELD detected 87% of cancers that were early stage and curable. The false positive rate was 10%. And we must pay attention to this. The false positive rate shouldn't be discounted because the research is clear. It leads to incredible psychological stress, spending more money and more time and more stress to confirm results, over treatment, and being driven further into the medical mill for no reason. But the cancers that can actually kill a patient, that often start with larger polyps, Guardant only found 13% of these. An FDA advisory committee recommended approval on May 23rd, but noted that the test's inability to prevent cancer is a significant limitation. You think? The committee stated that the only reason they recommended approval is that it might prompt people who avoid screening for colorectal cancer to do it. And by the way, that was the justification for Cologuard, which was in last Monday's newsletter. Cologuard doesn't work any better. It's the one that they're advertising on TV right now, that you can do it at home and all that sort of thing. It's much more expensive than this, actually, but it also doesn't work. The whole idea, and doctors have acknowledged it, is if it's negative, you have to have a colonoscopy to confirm, and if it's positive, you have to have a colonoscopy confirmed. So this is basically the same premise here. So on July 29th, the FDA approved it, and they're approving almost everything. So to be clear, that's certainly not any type of representation that this is safe or effective. So what does all this mean, right? Well, how do we tie all this together? Well, first of all, I want to state, and many of you have heard me state this before, there are no early detection screening tests that reduce the risk of colorectal cancer or death from colorectal cancer. In fact, only one population screening test has ever been shown to work, as in reducing death rate. That's Pap testing for cervical cancer, and we misuse that, but at least it does reduce the risk of dying of cervical cancer. Now, we do know what causes colon cancer. The primary cause is a diet high in animal foods and fat. And I won't regurgitate all the evidence here. Our members have access to our library and can read the articles there. But the summary of the evidence is that high sulfur amino acids, which are concentrated in animal foods, irritate the mucosal lining of the colon, which leads to polyps. Diets high in fat and protein and containing copious amounts of animal food often cause constipation. And by the way, this was reported in all of the studies that were done on Atkins back in the day when that was the popular diet. The beneficial bacteria in your gut thrive on fiber, and most people just don't eat enough of it. The pathogenic bacteria thrive on protein, fat, and refined sugar, and that's what most people are living on. Adopting a high fiber, plant based diet, but not necessarily vegan, to be clear, cleans out the colon, nourishes the good critters, and stops the irritation and growth of polyps. Now, when I deliver lectures to groups about topics like this, I'm often asked, well, what about the people who won't eat the right diet? What should they do? Wouldn't they benefit from colonoscopy or population screening? Well, let's face it, most of the people who are showing up for screening now are not eating the right diet, and screening hasn't reduced the death rate for any cancer except for cervical cancer, as mentioned before. There just isn't a shortcut for people who won't maintain their bodies properly, or their houses, or their cars for that matter. And I think one of the worst observations I've made about how things are in our country and in westernized countries is that many people who let their bodies fall into disrepair take really good care of their houses and cars, and they wouldn't think of neglecting either one. And they should just stop and look in the mirror and say, if my car had the equivalent amount of neglect that this body has, it probably wouldn't move out of the driveway. All right. So let's get serious about what matters. Unless you have a healthy body, cars and houses won't do you much good. And that's where your focus maybe ought to be. So another question that I get often is, what should you do if you have a family history of colorectal cancer, or if you're one of those people that had a colonoscopy and they snipped out some polyps? Well, first of all, that doesn't reduce the risk, as that 2022 study showed. But first, you can stop. Here, I have two pieces of advice for you. One is stop growing polyps. Change your diet now. You don't have to grow polyps, right? If you feel the need to do something, flexible sigmoidoscopy was the gold standard before colonoscopy was approved, and it's much less invasive, much less risky, because there's actual risk of death from colonoscopy. You're not going to see that with sigmoidoscopy, and the dreadful fluids and everything that are used don't have to be used. So that would be the better option. But I will stand by my recommendation that the most important strategy for avoiding all types of cancer is diet change, habit change, weight loss. Stop the behaviors that cause cancer, and you have a much lower risk of cancer. That's really the most important thing to do. All right, that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. And I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news. Thanks for watching.